When Donald Trump first suggested buying Greenland in 2019, during his first term as president, the idea was widely dismissed as unrealistic and was quickly forgotten. However, at the start of his second term, the idea of acquiring Greenland has re-emerged as a serious foreign policy objective. Trump has openly questioned Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland, described US control of the island as an absolute necessity, and has even refused to rule out the use of force to achieve this goal. Denmark's control over Greenland has a unique colonial history. Internationally, Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland has long been accepted and rarely questioned. Internally, however, Greenland's people have continued a long process of decolonization, which is now moving toward independence. This follows decades of cultural and political integration into Denmark, much of it imposed during the 1950s. I will address both the external and internal sides of this story. Control over Arctic territories developed differently from other parts of the world. Because the Arctic is remote, difficult to access, and harsh to live in, traditional methods of claiming land, such as conquest, settlement, or occupation, were not always possible. As a result, international law allowed states to claim sovereignty over these regions with minimal physical presence, especially when no other countries actively challenged those claims. This approach largely ignored the rights of indigenous peoples, even though Inuit communities have lived in Greenland for thousands of years. Denmark's claim to Greenland followed this pattern. In 1721, a Danish-Norwegian missionary established a settlement in Greenland, marking the beginning of Danish control. For centuries, Denmark exercised authority over the island without serious international opposition. The only major challenge came from Norway in the early 1930s, when it briefly claimed eastern Greenland. This dispute was settled by an international court, which ruled in Denmark's favor, citing Denmark's intention to act as sovereign, its actual exercise of authority, and the lack of stronger competing claims. Since then, no state has formally contested Denmark's sovereignty. The United States has also consistently recognized Danish control over Greenland. In several agreements throughout the 20th century, the US explicitly acknowledged Danish sovereignty, even while securing rights to establish defense facilities on the island. These agreements made clear that American military presence did not affect Denmark's sovereignty. Over time, this consistent recognition has created a strong legal and political barrier preventing the US from later challenging Greenland's status as part of Denmark. While Denmark's authority has been widely accepted from the outside, its control looks very different from an internal perspective. For Greenlanders, Danish rule involved colonization marked by political domination, economic exploitation, cultural discrimination, and forced assimilation. After arriving in Greenland, Denmark established missionary and trading posts. Colonial control in the 18th century relied heavily on forced Christianization and economic monopolies. Denmark controlled all trade, limited what goods could be imported, and shaped local livelihoods to serve colonial economic interests. This system remained in place well into the 20th century. After World War II, Denmark joined the United Nations and initially listed Greenland as a non-self-governing territory. Under international law, Denmark was supposed to promote Greenland's political development and eventual self-government. Instead, Denmark chose to fully integrate Greenland into the Danish state. Greenlanders became Danish citizens, gained representation in the Danish parliament, and Greenland was removed from the UN list of colonial territories. Critics argue that this move was designed to block future independence claims and remove Denmark's image as a colonial power. Following this integration, Denmark introduced a series of reforms in the 1950s and 1960s aimed at reshaping Greenlandic society along Danish lines. These policies, often imposed without local consent, had lasting social consequences. Communities were broken up as people were moved into urban housing. Traditional ways of life, including hunting, were disrupted. Children were separated from their families and educated in Danish, leading many to lose their native language and cultural identity. Women's reproductive rights were violated, and many now describe these policies as a form of cultural destruction. The long-term effects are still visible today, including high rates of suicide and substance abuse linked to colonial trauma. Denmark began to acknowledge Greenland's autonomy in the late 1970s, in line with broader global recognition of indigenous rights. Home rule was introduced, giving Greenland its own parliament and government. This autonomy was expanded further in 2009, when Greenland was recognized as a distinct people with the right to self-determination. Greenland gained control over most domestic affairs, including natural resources, while Denmark retained authority over defense and foreign policy. Today, Greenland enjoys extensive self-government and functions much like a state within a state. Importantly, the current legal framework allows Greenland to become fully independent through a democratic process. Independence would require negotiations with Denmark, approval by Greenland's parliament, referendum among Greenland's people, and consent from the Danish parliament. This provides a clear, lawful path toward independence, and momentum in Greenland strongly points in that direction. A draft constitution for an independent Greenland has already been prepared, reflecting a widespread desire to break free from colonial structures. Public opinion shows strong support for independence, even though there is debate about timing and economic consequences. What is clear is that Greenland's people have no interest in being taken over by another country, whether through purchase, occupation, or any other means. Greenland's government has firmly stated that the island's future must be decided by its inhabitants alone. Its leaders have repeatedly emphasized that Greenland is not for sale and that its only acceptable future status is independence. While an independent Greenland could, in theory, choose to join another state, such a move would be highly unlikely and historically unprecedented. Attempts to pressure Greenland economically or politically would violate fundamental principles of international law, including self-determination, territorial integrity, and sovereign equality. In this context, strong international support for Greenland's right to decide its own future remains essential. One of the main reasons often given for acquiring Greenland is security. Greenland has a very important geopolitical location and has long been seen as central to U.S. defense strategy. Importantly, the current legal framework allows Greenland to become fully independent through a democratic process. Independence would require negotiations with Denmark, approval by Greenland's parliament, referendum among Greenland's people, and consent from the Danish parliament. This provides a clear, lawful path toward independence, and momentum in Greenland strongly points in that direction. A draft constitution for an independent Greenland has already been prepared, reflecting a widespread desire to break free from colonial structures. Public opinion shows strong support for independence, even though there is debate about timing and economic consequences. What is clear is that Greenland's people have no interest in being taken over by another country, whether through purchase, occupation, or any other means. Greenland's government has firmly stated that the island's future must be decided by its inhabitants alone. Its leaders have repeatedly emphasized that Greenland is not for sale and that its only acceptable future status is independence. Given the extent of existing cooperation and U.S. influence, there is no real need to change the current arrangement. The United States can already achieve its security goals by continuing to work with Greenland and Denmark. Using force to take control of Greenland would not strengthen U.S. security, it would seriously damage it. Such an action would amount to one NATO member invading another, effectively destroying the alliance itself. The resulting instability would have severe and unpredictable consequences for global security. It would also further weaken the foundations of the post-World War II international order, especially the principles that prohibit the use of force, protect territorial integrity, and uphold sovereign equality. These principles are already under strain, particularly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and undermining them further would make global peace and cooperation even harder to sustain. Another major reason the current U.S. administration is interested in Greenland is its vast natural resources, especially rare earth minerals. These minerals are crucial for modern technologies because of their unique magnetic and electrochemical properties. Access to such resources has become increasingly important for economic and strategic reasons, particularly as countries seek to reduce their dependence on China. In a related development, the US has also shown interest in securing rare earth minerals from Ukraine in exchange for military support. Greenland is enormous in size. It is the 12th largest country in the world, covering an area equal to about 1/5 of the United States. Beyond its land territory, Greenland also has a massive continental shelf extending far into the Arctic Ocean, creating an even larger area rich in natural resources. Together, this territory contains fossil fuels, metals, precious stones, and a wide range of minerals, including rare earth elements. Many of these minerals are considered critical to national security and economic stability. Although most of Greenland is currently covered by ice, climate change is gradually exposing mineral deposits that were previously inaccessible. Greenland's leaders see resource development as a way to strengthen the economy and move closer to full independence by reducing reliance on fishing. Large-scale mining is expected to play a key role in future economic growth and state building. At the same time, Greenland has made it clear that it wants this development to happen on its own terms. Since gaining greater autonomy from Denmark, Greenland has effectively taken control of its natural resources. Early self-government arrangements recognized that Greenland's people have fundamental rights over these resources. Over time, Greenland gained full authority to regulate mining and offshore resource activities. One of the first areas transferred from Danish control to Greenland was mineral resource management. Alongside this transfer of authority, Greenland developed a strong and detailed legal framework to govern resource extraction. Its laws require strict environmental protection, health and safety measures, and thorough environmental and social impact assessments. These assessments are designed to involve local communities, identify potential risks and benefits, and ensure that economic gains are shared with Greenland's people. The overall goal is to balance economic development with social responsibility and environmental sustainability. Several Greenlandic institutions oversee resource activities, enforce safety and environmental standards, and protect nature and the climate. The extractive sector is also expected to prioritize local employment, involve Greenlandic businesses, support knowledge transfer, and respect cultural traditions. There are even plans to establish a national fund to ensure that profits from mining benefit society as a whole. Of course, there are still open questions about whether mining in Greenland will be profitable or technically feasible. However, expectations remain high. The United States and Greenland have already agreed to cooperate in developing key energy and mineral sectors, and Greenland has expressed a willingness to deepen trade relations with the US, especially with Arctic regions like Alaska. Importantly, US ownership of Greenland is not necessary to gain access to its minerals. Cooperation is already possible within existing legal and political arrangements, as long as Greenland's sovereignty is respected. However, Greenland's strong emphasis on environmental protection, social consent, and local economic benefit may conflict with the current US administration's approach to resource extraction. Recent US policy statements suggest a focus on aggressive drilling, reduced environmental regulation, and expanded fossil fuel production, including in sensitive Arctic areas. This vision contrasts sharply with Greenland's carefully designed resource governance model. If the United States were to seek unrestricted access to Greenland's natural wealth, full territorial control would certainly make that easier. But such a move would risk repeating the worst features of colonial exploitation, decisions made without democratic input, profits flowing mainly to powerful corporations, thus minimal benefits for local communities, and serious environmental and social harm. This would directly undermine Greenland's hard-won sovereignty and its commitment to sustainable and just development. Seen alongside threats to retake the Panama Canal, pressure Canada into joining the United States, or take control of Gaza and claim ownership over it while displacing its population, Donald Trump's repeated attempts to acquire Greenland must be firmly rejected as illegal, illegitimate, and dangerous. These proposals reflect an imperial mindset, one that treats territory as something to be taken in order to expand power, outmaneuver rivals, and secure exclusive access to land and natural resources for economic gain. The idea that land can be seized or traded like property, without regard for the people who live there, belongs to the past. While territorial expansion shaped much of human history, the period after World War II marked a turning point. The international community developed a new moral and legal consensus built on respect for sovereign equality, self-determination, non-intervention, territorial integrity, and human rights, along with a commitment to peaceful cooperation. This rules-based international order is more important now than ever. It provides the framework needed to address urgent global challenges such as artificial intelligence, climate change, biodiversity loss, global health threats, and many others. Trump's rhetoric about territorial acquisition signals a rejection of international law and cooperative problem-solving, replacing it with a zero-sum approach that prioritizes power and narrow national interests over shared global solutions.